At my husband's funeral, my own son, Ethan, blamed me for everything, then told me not to even show up at the viewing. His wife, Chloe, just stood there, agreeing. I was shattered, but in that moment, something shifted inside me. This is my story. I'm glad you're here. Like, share, and let me know where you're listening from. The soft glow of the bedside lamp cast long shadows across Arthur's face, illuminating the lines etched by 70 years of laughter, worry, and unwavering love. His breath was shallow, each exhale a fragile whisper in the otherwise silent hospital room. My hand, wrinkled with age, rested gently in his, feeling the faint tremor of his weakening grip. 45 years. We had built a life together, Arthur and I. From a small apartment filled with hand-me-down furniture, to a home brimming with memories, 2 children, and countless moments of quiet contentment. He was my anchor, my confidant, the man who knew my every thought before I even voiced it. Elara, he murmured, his voice barely audible. I leaned closer, my heart aching with a familiar tenderness, mixed now with a terrifying dread. My darling, don't you ever forget how much I love you. And take care of everything. You always do. A faint smile touched his lips, a final testament to the unwavering faith he had in me. He squeezed my hand one last time, a gentle pressure that slowly, imperceptibly, faded. The rhythmic beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor, a sound that had been a constant companion through these last days, suddenly elongated. A flat, piercing tone filled the room, cold and absolute. The life drained from Arthur's eyes, leaving behind a vacant stare that mirrored the emptiness now forming in my chest. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, the silence deafening despite the piercing alarm. My Arthur was gone. My love. My life. A primal scream caught in my throat, threatening to tear through me. But before I could utter a sound, the door burst open. Ethan stormed in, a hurricane of fury in stark contrast to the stillness of death. His eyes, usually warm and familiar, blazed with an anger that shocked me. He wasn't grieving. He was incandescent with rage. "Why didn't you call me, Mother?" He spat, his voice harsh and accusatory. He strode towards the bed, not to embrace his father or comfort me, but to glare at the lifeless form, then back at me. How could you keep this from me? I'm his son. My own grief was still a raw wound, but his words pierced through it, adding a fresh layer of pain. "Ethan, I tried," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "I called you several times. I left messages. The doctor said it could be any minute for the last 2 days. I couldn't get a hold of you. I had called. Countless times. Even Chloe had been unresponsive." He scoffed, a dismissive sound that twisted my gut. "Oh, please, don't start with your dramatics, Mother. We all know how you exaggerate everything." He waved a hand impatiently, as if my profound sorrow was a minor inconvenience. "It's fine. I'm here now. I'll take care of everything. The funeral, the arrangements, all of it." Just then, Chloe, Ethan's wife, appeared in the doorway, a sympathetic yet superior smile on her perfectly made-up face. She looked at me, then at Ethan, her gaze lingering on his angry profile. "Ethan, darling, calm down," she cooed, gliding into the room and placing a hand on his arm. To me, she offered a saccharine smile. "Elara, dear, you look utterly exhausted. Perhaps it's best if you go home. Ethan and I can manage things here. It's what Arthur would have wanted, for you to rest." Rest? How could I rest when my heart felt like it had been ripped from my body? How could I rest when my own son was treating me like an incompetent stranger? The finality of Arthur's death mingled with the bitter taste of betrayal. This was my husband, my love, and my son was seizing control of his farewell, as if I had no right to it. "Are you even capable of handling all this, Mother?" Ethan continued, turning his full attention back to me, his voice dripping with condescension. "The finances, the decisions. I mean, Father always took care of everything, didn't he? Let's be realistic. You're simply not equipped for this level of responsibility." His words were a physical blow. Arthur had trusted me with everything. We were partners. His questioning of my competence was a deliberate, cruel attempt to diminish me, to make me feel small, and incapable, at the very moment I needed strength. In fact, Ethan added, his voice hardening, I don't even think you should come to the viewing. It would just be awkward, unnecessary drama. You wouldn't want to embarrass yourself, would you? The suggestion hung in the air, cold and sharp. Not come to Arthur's viewing? To be barred from saying a public goodbye to the man I had loved for nearly half a century? It was unthinkable. An act of such profound disrespect that it stole my breath. I stood there, stunned, the tears finally beginning to fall freely, but they were no longer just tears of grief. They were tears of shock, of hurt, of a blossoming, unfamiliar anger. Chloe, ever so helpful, gently took my arm. Come on, Alara, let's get you home. You need to lie down. She steered me out of the room, past the stunned nurses and doctors who had witnessed Ethan's outburst, and into the cool hospital corridor. The ride home was a blur. Chloe drove in silence, her posture rigid, her occasional glances in the rearview mirror betraying a cold satisfaction. When she dropped me off at the house, our house, Arthur's and mine, she didn't come in. She didn't offer comfort or a cup of tea. She simply nodded, a tight smile on her face, and drove away, leaving me utterly alone in the quiet, echoing rooms. My home felt empty, yet simultaneously too full of the ghosts of our life together. Through the front window, I watched Chloe's car disappear down the street. I saw, in my mind's eye, Ethan back at the hospital, taking charge, barking orders, playing the dutiful, capable son. Arthur had always been so proud of him, so certain he would grow into a man of integrity. The irony was a bitter pill, but as I stood there, a widow, abandoned by my son, a strange, unexpected sensation began to stir within me. It wasn't just grief, nor was it merely humiliation. It was a hardening, a quiet resolve. The Morrison and Sons funeral home stood stark and somber against the twilight sky, its red brick facade a dull contrast to the stream of headlights pulling into the parking lot. A steady drizzle had begun, painting the pavement a slick, reflective black. I sat in my car, engine off, the chills seeping into my bones, yet I couldn't bring myself to step out. It felt like I was watching a scene unfold on a distant stage, an event I was connected to by the deepest threads of my being, yet from which I was utterly detached. Through the rain-streaked windshield, I observed the procession of mourners, dressed in their solemn blacks and grays, hurrying under umbrellas towards the warm glow spilling from the funeral home's entrance. Each familiar face was a pang to my heart, a reminder of the life Arthur had lived, the connections he had forged, his golf buddies, former colleagues, even a few of our old bridge club friends. They were all there to pay their respects to my husband, and I, his wife of 45 years, was relegated to the periphery, a ghost in my own grief. Inside, framed by the wide glass doors, I could see Ethan and Chloe. They stood at the receiving line, perfect replicas of devoted mourners. Ethan, tall and imposing in a tailored suit, offered firm handshakes and solemn nods. Chloe, draped in an elegant black dress, managed a delicate, practiced sincerity, her hand often resting gently on Ethan's arm as they greeted guests. Their faces were composed, their voices hushed, their movements measured. They looked the part of the grieving son and daughter-in-law, a tableau of respectable sorrow. It was a performance, and they were brilliant actors. A bitter wave washed over me as I recalled the last few months. While Arthur had battled his illness, fading slowly but surely, it had been me, always me, by his side. Ethan had been conspicuously absent, always with an excuse. A pressing business trip, a critical client meeting, a sudden flu bug that conveniently kept him away from his ailing father's bedside. "I'll be there as soon as I can, Mother. Don't worry." He'd promised repeatedly, his words hollow echoes now. He'd visited twice in the last month. Brief, uncomfortable appearances where he mostly checked his phone. Chloe had only come once, complaining about the hospital smell, yet here they were, basking in the spotlight of Arthur's passing, accepting condolences as if they had borne the brunt of his final days. A tap on my window startled me. I jumped, my heart leaping into my throat. Lena Garcia, my neighbor from 2 houses down, peered in, her face etched with concern. Her usually cheerful eyes were wide with confusion. "Elara? My goodness! What are you doing out here in the cold? Why aren't you inside? Is everything all right?" she asked, her voice hushed but insistent. I rolled down the window a crack, letting in a gust of cold, damp air that matched the chill in my soul. How could I explain? How could I tell Lena that my own son had forbidden me from attending my husband's viewing, that he had dismissed my grief and questioned my capabilities, all while stealing the role of chief mourner? The shame burned, a hot flush beneath my pallor. "Oh, Lena," I began, struggling to keep my voice steady. "No, everything's fine. I said my goodbyes at the hospital, you know. Arthur and I had our moment. I just felt like I needed some quiet time to process." The words felt flimsy, transparent even to my own ears, and I knew Lena saw right through them. Her brow furrowed deeper. "At the hospital? Elara, that's not like you. Arthur would want you there. Everyone is asking where you are." She paused, her gaze flicking towards the entrance where Ethan and Chloe stood. A knowing look crossed her face, a flicker of understanding that made my stomach churn. "Well, I'll call you later, Elara. We need to talk." With a final, sympathetic pat on my car roof, she hurried towards the entrance, casting a suspicious glance at Ethan and Chloe as she passed. I watched Lena disappear inside, then turned my attention back to the somber procession. The Miller family, Arthur's oldest friends, walked in, their faces tear-stained. Mrs. Peterson, stooped with age, was escorted by her grandson, a young man Arthur had mentored. My heart ached to go to them, to offer comfort, to receive it, to share stories of Arthur. But I was trapped, an outcast at my own husband's farewell. The loneliness was suffocating. Then, I saw it. As another car pulled up, drawing their attention, Chloe subtly shifted, her eyes darting towards my car. A faint, almost imperceptible smile played on her lips, chillingly satisfied. Ethan, too, cast a quick glance in my direction, his expression unreadable. But the set of his jaw seemed to harden. They were cataloging the arrivals, undoubtedly. But they were also checking on me, ensuring I remained in my solitary vigil. In that moment, a profound clarity washed over me. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, or a hasty, grief-stricken outburst from Ethan. This was deliberate. This was calculated. Their actions, their words, their banishment of me from Arthur's final public ceremony. It was all orchestrated to humiliate me, to assert their dominance, to control the narrative of Arthur's passing and, by extension, his estate. The grief that had consumed me began to morph into something colder, sharper. Just then, a sleek black sedan pulled into the lot. A woman with impeccably coiffed silver hair and a sharp, tailored suit emerged, carrying a briefcase. Evelyn Lee, Arthur's lawyer. My stomach clenched. She exchanged a brief, formal word with Ethan and Chloe, her expression impassive. Then, her gaze swept across the parking lot, landing directly on my car. Her eyes met mine, and a faint, knowing smile touched her lips. Without hesitation, she raised a hand and waved. Ethan, mid-handshake with a distant cousin, saw it. His jaw visibly tightened, his eyes narrowed, a flicker of genuine concern, or perhaps fear, crossing his face as Evelyn Lee, Arthur's esteemed attorney, began to walk purposefully towards my parked car. The tap on my window was gentle this time, a stark contrast to Lena's urgent rap. I looked up to see Evelyn Lee, her face kind but serious, her eyes holding a depth of understanding that was a balm to my raw nerves. She offered a small, sad smile, pushing stray strands of my hair from my face. "Elara, my dear," she said, her voice a soft murmur against the hiss of the rain. "My sincerest condolences. Arthur was a remarkable man." Her genuine warmth startled me from the cold, bitter thoughts that had consumed me. It was the first true compassion I had received since Arthur's passing. "Thank you, Evelyn," I managed, my voice raspy. The simple act of receiving empathy nearly brought fresh tears to my eyes. Evelyn nodded, her gaze serious. "Arthur spoke with me a few weeks ago. He specifically asked me to reach out to you after the funeral. He said there were some important decisions he wanted you to be aware of, matters that required your attention. She paused, her eyes meeting mine with an unmistakable intensity. And Alara, please listen very carefully to me. Do not, under any circumstances, sign anything that Ethan might present to you. Not a single document. Promise me. My heart hammered against my ribs. Arthur had known. He had suspected. A flicker of hope, or perhaps just a renewed sense of purpose, ignited within me. Before I could respond, a shadow fell over us. Evelyn. Ethan's voice cut through the damp air, sharp and demanding. He was standing beside my car, his face a mask of concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. What are you doing? Mother should be home, resting. This is hardly the time for business. He tried to usher Evelyn away with a dismissive wave. Evelyn, however, was unswayed. She turned to him, her posture radiating quiet authority. Ethan, Alara is a competent adult, perfectly capable of deciding where she needs to be. Arthur himself entrusted me to speak with her. There are matters that require her personal attention. Her tone was firm, leaving no room for argument. I'll call you later, Alara, when you've had a chance to rest. With a final reassuring glance, she turned and walked back towards the funeral home, leaving Ethan seething beside my car. He leaned down, his face inches from mine, his eyes narrowed. What was that about, Mother? What did Evelyn want? What decisions? What business did Father have with her that didn't involve me? His questions tumbled out, rapid fire, laced with suspicion. Instinctively, I knew to hide Evelyn's warning. To reveal it would be to expose my hand prematurely. Nothing, Ethan, I said, feigning an exhaustion that wasn't entirely false. Just condolences, and she said she'd handle some paperwork for me. You know, since Arthur always dealt with the legalities, she was just being kind. I hoped my performance was convincing. He regarded me skeptically for a moment, clearly unconvinced. But the stream of mourners had thinned, and he couldn't press me further without drawing attention. Fine, he huffed. Just go home, Mother. Get some rest. He watched me start the engine, his expression unreadable, then turned and walked back to Chloe, who stood waiting, a silent, united front of control. As I drove away, I saw them both watching me in my rearview mirror, their figures dark and unyielding against the lighted entrance of the funeral home. The house was cold and still. Each room echoed with memories, the scent of Arthur's pipe tobacco lingering faintly in his study, his reading glasses still resting on the nightstand beside his half-read book. 45 years, every corner, every object, spoke of a shared life. Now, it was just me. The silence was a heavy shroud, weighing me down. I peeled off my black dress, the fabric feeling like a uniform of grief and indignity, and put on my old, comfortable robe, seeking solace in its familiar softness. My phone rang, a jarring intrusion into the quiet. It was Chloe. Alara, she began, her voice falsely sweet. Ethan and I are on our way over. We need to discuss some practical matters, urgent ones. We think it's best to get them out of the way now. My heart sank. Urgent practical matters. After what Evelyn had said, I knew exactly what kind of practical matters they would be. My brief moment of peace vanished, replaced by a fresh wave of anxiety. I looked around the house, my sanctuary, my home. Was this the beginning of their plan? Less than 20 minutes later, their car pulled into the driveway. They entered without knocking, as if they already owned the place. Ethan leading the way, Chloe trailing behind, clutching a slim leather folder and a legal pad. They looked less like grieving family and more like business executives on an acquisition trip. Ethan went straight to Arthur's favorite armchair, the one where he always read the paper, and settled into it as if by right. Chloe took the sofa, meticulously arranging her skirt. Right, Ethan began, clapping his hands together briskly, a gesture completely at odds with the solemnity of the day. Now that the formalities are mostly out of the way, we need to address your living situation, Mother. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his expression one of feigned concern. This house, it's far too much for you now. Arthur and I always discussed it. It's too big, too much maintenance. And frankly, with all his medical bills, the savings are, well, depleted. My breath hitched. Depleted? Arthur was a careful man, always planning, always prepared. This couldn't be true. What are you talking about, Ethan? I asked, my voice trembling. This is my home. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of it, and myself. Chloe interjected, her voice soft but firm. Elara, dear, be realistic. You're not getting any younger. And those medical bills were astronomical. Even Arthur couldn't have foreseen how much they would eat into everything. It's simply not financially viable for you to stay here. Ethan nodded in agreement. We've done some research, he continued, reaching into his folder. There's a lovely assisted living facility about 30 minutes from here. It's got excellent reviews, beautiful grounds, and it's perfect for someone like you, who needs a bit more structure. We think it's the ideal solution. Assisted living? 30 minutes away? They were trying to get rid of me, to pack me away like an unwanted antique. My resolve, which had been a quiet flicker, now flared into a determined flame. The mention of massive medical bills caught me completely off guard. Arthur and I had always been open about everything, especially finances. He handled the investments, but we discussed every major decision. Never once had he mentioned anything that would deplete our life savings. Medical bills? I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. What bills? We have excellent insurance, Ethan. Arthur was always so meticulous about that. Chloe sighed dramatically. Elara, darling, you simply wouldn't understand. These weren't ordinary bills. We're talking about experimental treatments. Private nurses around the clock. Specialized medications flown in from overseas. Things our insurance just didn't cover. Arthur insisted on trying everything, bless his heart. He didn't want to worry you, so he dealt with it all himself. With Ethan's help. Of course. Her words were smooth, plausible, yet a discordant note buzzed in my mind. Arthur would never have kept such critical financial news from me. He would never have put our future at such risk without consulting me. I felt like I was drowning, submerged under a torrent of their fabricated explanations. The sheer audacity of their claims left me breathless. If our savings were truly gone, how could they possibly afford an assisted living facility with a monthly fee of nearly $3,000? As they had just stated, the numbers didn't add up. Their story was full of holes, gaping chasms that my bewildered mind struggled to bridge. Then, Evelyn's warning echoed in my ears. Do not, under any circumstances, sign anything that Ethan might present to you. A chilling realization dawned. They weren't trying to help me. They were trying to get rid of me, to push me out of my home, away from anything that might connect me to Arthur's true legacy. They were trying to gain control, and my depleted savings were merely their excuse. The next day, Arthur's funeral service was everything he wouldn't have wanted. Formal, impersonal, and utterly devoid of the warmth that defined him. A pastor I had never met spoke of Arthur's distinguished career, his unwavering dedication to his company, and his pride in his son, Ethan. Not a single anecdote about his quirky sense of humor, his love for gardening, or the way he always brought me a cup of tea in bed every morning. I sat in the front pew, a black veil partially obscuring my face, a silent observer at my own husband's farewell, wishing I could stand up and tell them all about the real Arthur. Ethan delivered the eulogy, his voice resonating with an almost clinical precision. It sounded more like a business presentation than a heartfelt remembrance. He spoke of Arthur's financial acumen, his strategic mind, and his legacy in the corporate world. Again, no mention of the loving husband, the doting father, the man who read poetry to me on our anniversary. I felt a cold anger growing inside me, replacing the ache of grief. After the service, in the fellowship hall, Ethan and Chloe worked the room, networking among the mourners, exchanging business cards, cementing their carefully constructed image. I sat alone at a small table in the corner, a cup of lukewarm coffee clutched in my hands, a solitary island in a sea of polite condolences. No one dared approach me, not with Ethan and Chloe's watchful eyes constantly scanning the room. Just as I was contemplating a quiet escape, A shadow fell over my table. It was Evelyn Lee, her tailored suit still pristine, her expression one of genuine concern. "Elara," she said softly, her voice carrying a sense of urgency, "my heart goes out to you. I'm so sorry for your loss." She sat across from me, her briefcase resting on the floor beside her. "We really must talk, Elara, as soon as possible. About Arthur's final wishes." I looked at her, my voice low with a mix of fear and desperation. "Evelyn, they say Arthur's medical bills have wiped out everything. They want to move me to an assisted living facility. They even said I can't afford to stay in my own home." Evelyn's lips thinned, a hint of steel in her eyes. "Elara, please don't believe a word of it. It's quite the opposite, in fact." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Arthur was far more careful with his money than Ethan gives him credit for, and he made some very specific arrangements, knowing full well what might transpire." My breath hitched. He knew. Arthur had known. Evelyn reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope, sealed with a wax stamp bearing Arthur's initials. She placed it gently in my hands. "This is for you, Elara. From Arthur. He instructed me to give it to you when you were ready for the truth. It's addressed, 'For my beloved Elara, when you're ready for the truth.'" She watched me, her gaze unwavering. "He noticed. Elara, towards the end, he noticed how Ethan was treating you, how dismissive he was. It troubled him deeply. He wanted to make sure you were protected. No matter what." My fingers trembled as they closed around the envelope. The weight of it felt monumental, a lifeline thrown to me from beyond the grave. Arthur, my beloved Arthur, had seen it all. He had known, and he had acted. If you're finding Elara's story as gripping as I am, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. The weight of Arthur's envelope in my hand was both a comfort and a tremor of apprehension. It was true. Then, Arthur had seen it all. I thought back to the endless stream of dismissive remarks from Ethan, the thinly veiled contempt, the way he treated me as if I were a frail, witless woman during Arthur's illness. I had felt like an inconvenience, a burden, even in my own home. My quiet grief had been interpreted as weakness, my concern as dramatics. Arthur had seen through it all. Evelyn, sensing my thoughts, leaned in again. "Arthur regretted deeply not intervening sooner," she murmured, her gaze sympathetic. "He told me he'd been so focused on his own battle, he didn't realize the extent of Ethan's true character until it was almost too late. But he acted, Elara. He changed his will, among other things, to ensure you would be completely protected, no matter what Ethan tried to do." My eyes widened. Changed his will? The words resonated with a powerful, dizzying finality. Just as Evelyn was about to elaborate, her phone buzzed, and she apologized, standing up to take the call a few feet away. "I have to take this, Elara," she said, her voice dropping. "But I want you to come to my office tomorrow afternoon. Let's say at 2. We'll go over everything in detail. And remember," she added, her eyes serious once more, "do not sign anything." I clutched the envelope, my mind reeling. Part of me yearned to tear it open right then and there, to devour Arthur's words, to understand the truth. But a deeper part, laced with fear, hesitated. What secrets did it hold? What truths would shatter the already fragile landscape of my grief? Just then, Ethan and Chloe approached, their steps measured, their faces a blend of forced concern and thinly veiled curiosity. "Mother, what was Evelyn talking to you about?" Ethan asked, his eyes fixed on the envelope in my hand. His voice was too casual, too inquisitive. I instinctively tightened my grip on the letter and slipped it into my purse, a small act of defiance. "Just some paperwork from your father's business dealings, Ethan," I said, hoping my voice sounded calm. "Nothing for you to worry about. Evelyn is just sorting out a few things for me." The lie felt bitter on my tongue, but necessary. "Let me drive you home, Mother," Ethan insisted, his hand reaching for my arm. "You look exhausted." I pulled back, a newfound firmness in my voice. "No, thank you, Ethan. I'm perfectly capable of driving myself. I need a moment of quiet reflection. I stood up, feeling a surge of strength I hadn't known I possessed. For the first time, I looked him directly in the eye, my gaze unwavering. "I'll be fine." He frowned, a flicker of irritation crossing his face, but he didn't press. Chloe, however, gave me a tight, almost venomous smile, her eyes darting to my purse where the envelope was hidden. I could sense their frustration, the subtle shift in their carefully constructed control. They had expected me to be docile, defeated. They were clearly unprepared for even this small assertion of independence. I left them standing there and walked to my car, my back straight, my head held high. As I sat behind the wheel, the rain having finally ceased, I pulled the envelope out of my purse and held it close to my chest. Arthur. He was still protecting me, even now. A fragile sense of hope, a warmth I hadn't felt since his passing, began to bloom in my heart. This was not the end. It was a new beginning. That evening, alone in our quiet house, I finally opened Arthur's letter. His familiar handwriting, slightly shaky at the end, filled the pages. He wrote of his love, his regret for his own blindness, and his deep sorrow at witnessing Ethan's treatment of me. He confirmed my deepest fears, and in doing so, offered a profound validation of my pain. He had seen the way Ethan dismissed me, the way he questioned my intelligence, the way he and Chloe were already circling, waiting for him to pass. "My dearest Elara," the letter read, "I have tried to make amends for my oversight. I've ensured you will be safe, secure, and independent. This home, our sanctuary, is yours, free and clear, along with ample means to maintain it and live comfortably. My true legacy, my love, is you. Do not let them diminish you. Be strong, my love, and reclaim your life. You deserve all the happiness the world has to offer." He had left me not just an inheritance, but a purpose, a blueprint for resilience. The next afternoon, I walked into Evelyn Lee's office, a sense of calm resolve replacing the earlier fear. Her office was warm, filled with books and the scent of old paper and fresh coffee. She greeted me with a comforting smile. "Elara, I'm so glad you came." "Evelyn," I began, clutching Arthur's letter. "I've read his letter. I'm still confused and a little afraid. How could he have done all this? And how can it be impossible for Ethan to contest?" Evelyn nodded, her expression serious. "Arthur was a brilliant man, Elara, and meticulous. He saw this coming, and he planned for it. He made his arrangements legally sound, ironclad. He knew Ethan's character well enough to predict his moves, and he left no room for doubt or dispute. It's all perfectly legal, perfectly above board, and impossible to contest." "Why would anyone contest it, Evelyn?" I asked, my voice still laced with a lingering disbelief. "What would there be to contest?" Evelyn offered a small, knowing smile. "Because, Elara, what Arthur has left is not what Ethan is expecting, not by a long shot." She paused, then reached into her briefcase, pulling out 2 neatly bound documents. "This," she said, placing the first one before me, "is Arthur's original will, drafted almost 10 years ago. It's standard. It split everything evenly between you and Ethan, with the stipulation that you would have lifetime tenancy in the house, after which it would pass to Ethan." I was prost. I nodded, recalling vague discussions from years past. That sounded like Arthur, fair and practical. Then, she pushed the second document across the table. It was thicker, newer, the paper crisp and uncreased. "And this," Evelyn continued, her voice gaining a deliberate weight, "is Arthur's last will and testament. It was executed just 3 months ago." My hands trembled as I took the document. My eyes scanned the legal jargon, searching for clarity amidst the complex clauses. Phrases jumped out at me, bold and stark. Sole beneficiary, irrevocable trust, conditional inheritance limited to $5,000. My breath hitched. I looked up at Evelyn, my face a mask of confusion. Evelyn, sensing my struggle, explained. "Elara, Arthur has left almost everything to you. The house, Outright. His entire life insurance policy, all of his investments, his pension, every asset is now in your name or placed in a trust for your sole benefit. She paused, letting the words sink in. Ethan, on the other hand, is to receive a conditional inheritance of $5,000 and certain personal effects, primarily sentimental items, like Arthur's watch and golf clubs. A dizzying mix of shock, relief, and a profound sense of vindication washed over me. Arthur had truly seen it all. He had protected me. Arthur was very specific. Evelyn continued. He documented several incidents of Ethan's dismissive behavior towards you during his illness. He saw how Ethan neglected him while he was ill, and how he actively tried to isolate you. And, Evelyn added, her voice dropping, he was particularly troubled by Ethan's persistent attempts to pressure him into changing the original will months ago. Ethan wanted the house directly, not subject to your lifetime tenancy. He was pushing for control. Even then, a wave of nausea hit me. So, while I was tending to Arthur, holding his hand, comforting him in his pain, my son was already circling, a vulture eyeing his inheritance, trying to dislodge me from my home. The betrayal was a fresh wound, but now, it was accompanied by a powerful surge of righteous anger. He had played me for a fool, and all the while, Arthur had been witnessing it, silently plotting his countermove. Arthur, in his wisdom, Evelyn explained, included a very important clause in this new will. Should Ethan contest the will, his conditional inheritance of $5,000 will be immediately forfeited. It will be donated in its entirety to a charity of Arthur's choosing, a foundation for underprivileged children. A faint, almost triumphant smile touched my lips. My Arthur. Even in death, he had managed to deliver a perfect, poetic justice. Arthur also specifically instructed me, Evelyn went on, that this will was not to be read until 1 full week after the funeral. He said he wanted to give Ethan and Chloe enough time to reveal their true intentions, and for you, Elara, to gain some clarity. She then leaned back, a knowing glint in her eyes. And they certainly did, didn't they? I received a very interesting call from your neighbor, Lena Garcia, this morning. She was quite disturbed by Ethan's treatment of you at the viewing. It seems Arthur's instincts were spot on. My heart swelled with gratitude for Lena, and for Arthur's foresight. He had known their true colors would show. So, Evelyn concluded, a confident gleam in her eyes, I've arranged for the official will reading for tomorrow morning, here in this very conference room. 10 o'clock sharp. I've already informed Ethan. I imagine he's in for quite a surprise. The anticipation of seeing Ethan's face when he heard the truth sent a thrilling shiver down my spine. The fear that had gnawed at me for days began to dissipate, replaced by a quiet, steely determination. The next morning, the conference room felt charged with unspoken tension. I sat composed, dressed simply but elegantly. Arthur's letter tucked safely in my purse. A silent talisman. Ethan and Chloe arrived, radiating an air of smug anticipation. Ethan wore a confident smirk, no doubt picturing himself inheriting a fortune. Chloe, ever the dutiful partner, sat beside him, her hand resting possessively on his arm, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. They had no idea what was coming. Ethan and Chloe entered Evelyn's conference room, radiating an almost palpable air of self-satisfaction. Ethan carried his legal pad, poised to jot down figures and properties, while Chloe, ever the picture of poised elegance, settled beside him, a triumphant glint in her eye. They nodded curtly at me, then ignored me, directing their attention solely to Evelyn. They were ready to claim their spoils. Evelyn, composed and professional, cleared her throat. Good morning. We are here today for the reading of Arthur Morrison's last will and testament. She picked up the thick document I had seen the day before. This will, executed 3 months ago, on June 15th, supersedes all previous versions. Ethan frowned, a flicker of surprise on his face. 3 months ago? Father updated it so recently? He exchanged a quick, confused glance with Chloe. Evelyn merely nodded, her expression unreadable. She began to read. Her voice, clear and precise. To my beloved wife, Elara Morrison, for her unwavering love, companionship, and steadfast devotion throughout our 45 years of marriage, and in recognition of her enduring care during my illness, I leave my entire estate, including, but not limited to our family home at 123 Maple Drive, all financial investments, life insurance policies, pension funds, and personal property to be held in an irrevocable trust for her sole and exclusive benefit, with full power to manage and dispose of as she sees fit. Ethan visibly jolted in his chair, his head snapping up. "Wait, what?" he blurted out, interrupting Evelyn. "The entire estate? What about me?" Evelyn paused, allowing his outburst to hang in the air, then continued, her voice unwavering. "To my son, Ethan Morrison, I leave the sum of $5,000, along with my personal effects, including my wristwatch and golf clubs." She closed the document, placing it gently on the table. "That concludes the key provisions of Arthur Morrison's last will and testament." The room fell into a stunned silence. Ethan and Chloe stared at Evelyn, then at me, their faces contorting in disbelief. Their carefully constructed masks of composure crumbled. "This is a mistake," Ethan finally roared, slamming his hand on the table, making the glasses jump. "Father wouldn't do this. He must have been manipulated. He was sick. He wasn't of sound mind." Evelyn met his fury with calm authority. "Arthur Morrison was examined by 2 independent medical professionals on the day he executed this will, as per his specific request. Both certified him to be of sound mind and body, fully aware of his decisions. There is no question of manipulation, Ethan." Chloe, her voice now shrill, joined the fray. "But the medical bills, they wiped out everything. How can Alara possibly manage? We said the savings were depleted. And this house is too much for her. Where is the money coming from for her assisted living?" Evelyn's gaze, sharp and cold, fixed on Chloe. "Ah, yes. The depleted savings. I have here a detailed record of all of Arthur's medical expenses. His insurance covered the vast majority. His out-of-pocket expenses, including a few specialized treatments not fully covered, amounted to a grand total of under $3,000. Arthur's estate, far from being depleted, is robust and substantial. If your dies," Ethan went pale, his face draining of all color. "I'll contest it," he snarled, his voice trembling with impotent rage. "I'll get my own lawyers. You can't do this." Evelyn picked up the will again, turning to a specific page. "And that brings us to the next clause. Arthur, in his foresight, included a specific provision stating that should Ethan Morrison contest this will, his conditional inheritance of $5,000 will be immediately forfeited. The entire sum will be donated to the Hope for Little Stars charity for underprivileged children." The air left Ethan's lungs in a silent whoosh. He slumped back in his chair, utterly defeated. I looked at Evelyn, a silent plea in my eyes. "Evelyn," I said, my voice soft but firm, "would you please read the letter Arthur left for me?" Evelyn nodded, retrieving the sealed envelope from her briefcase. She opened it and began to read Arthur's familiar handwriting aloud, his words filling the room, painting a devastating picture of their recent past. He wrote of my unwavering devotion, my sacrifices, and then, with heartbreaking clarity, detailed Ethan's increasingly disrespectful and dismissive treatment of me. "The final straw," Evelyn read, her voice imbued with Arthur's sorrow, "came when Ethan, under the guise of practicality, suggested I bypass Alara entirely and leave the house directly to him, claiming it would be too much for her to manage alone. This callous disregard for Alara's feelings and her future, while she sat tirelessly by my side, solidified my conviction. My beloved Alara deserves to live in peace, security, and dignity in the home we built together. It is my deepest hope that one day Ethan will come to understand the true meaning of love and respect." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Ethan sat stunned, a kaleidoscope of anger, shame, and disbelief warring on his face. Chloe's carefully constructed composure finally cracked, a flicker of raw fury in her eyes. I looked at Ethan, my voice gentle despite the storm within me. "Arthur loved you, Ethan. He always did. But he saw how you treated me. He saw it all. Having to torment. Ethan finally looked up, his eyes blazing. "You turned him against me," he accused, pointing a trembling finger at me. "No, Ethan," I said, my voice steady. "You did that yourself," Chloe, desperate to salvage something, burst out. "But she can't manage money. She's never handled the finances," Evelyn interjected, her voice sharp. "Elara Morrison has managed a household budget, investments, and expenses for 45 years. She has a deep understanding of her finances, as evidenced by her meticulous records. Furthermore, with Arthur's substantial estate, she is more than capable of hiring any professional help she deems necessary." Ethan's last argument, already weak. Withered. "The house is too big for her anyway." "Yes, Ethan," I responded, a faint, sad smile on my lips. "That's what you said, isn't it? That I couldn't maintain it." Evelyn delivered the final blow. "With Arthur's provisions, Elara is financially secure enough to hire an entire staff to maintain the house, should she choose. Her future is entirely her own." Chloe, her face a mask of scarlet fury, suddenly sprang up. "Come on, Ethan, we don't have to listen to this." She grabbed his arm, pulling him towards the door. Ethan, defeated, lingered for a moment, his gaze shifting between me and Evelyn, a bitter, resentful glint in his eyes. He opened his mouth, then closed it, shaking his head. "Don't come crying to us when you realize you can't handle it," he muttered, his voice thick with venom, before allowing Chloe to drag him out of the room. As Ethan and Chloe stormed out, leaving behind a silence far more profound than the one before, a strange lightness bloomed in my chest. It wasn't a triumphant joy, but a deep, quiet sense of peace. For the first time in months, perhaps even years, I felt truly, unequivocally free. Free from the weight of unspoken slights, from the burden of their expectations, and most importantly, free to grieve Arthur in my own way, on my own terms. 3 months melted into a season of quiet transformation. My house, once a source of anxiety, became a haven. With Arthur's generous provisions, I hired a wonderful cleaning service, a diligent gardener, and even a handyman for the odd repair. The burden of maintenance, which Ethan had so confidently declared beyond my capabilities, vanished. I joined a local book club, finding solace and camaraderie in shared stories. Watercolor classes, a childhood dream I'd never pursued, filled my afternoons with vibrant colors. I even started volunteering at the local animal shelter, finding joy in the unconditional love of abandoned creatures. Life, slowly but surely, was beginning again. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I hesitated, almost letting it go to voicemail, but something prompted me to answer. "Hello? Mother, it's Ethan." His voice was tentative, uncertain, completely devoid of the usual bravado. It was a sound I hadn't heard from him in a very long time. My heart gave a little lurch. "Ethan," I responded, my voice calm, betraying none of the surprise I felt. I've been thinking a lot about Father's letter," he began, his words slow and measured, "and everything that happened. Chloe and we've separated." He paused, and I heard a weary sigh on the other end. "She couldn't get over the money, Mother. She kept accusing you of manipulating Father, even after Evelyn showed her all the paperwork. I finally realized she never really cared about me, just what she thought I would inherit." A raw vulnerability laced his voice that pierced through my guardedness. "I also realized," he continued, his voice barely a whisper, "that everything Father wrote about how I treated you, it was true. I've been a fool, Mother. I truly have." There was a long silence, pregnant with unspoken regret. Could I come and visit you? I want to really talk. I want to understand what Father was trying to tell me." My eyes welled up with tears, a mix of sadness for the path he'd taken and a nascent hope for the one he was now seeking. "Of course, Ethan," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You're always welcome here. Always." I thought of Arthur's letter, his desire for Ethan to understand. Especially then, I added softly. That afternoon, Ethan sat in Arthur's old armchair, the same one where he had once tried to orchestrate my removal. But today, he looked smaller, humbled, the arrogance stripped away. He wasn't perched imperiously. He was hunched, his hands clasped, his gaze fixed on the worn carpet. We talked for hours. He spoke of his childhood, of the pressure he felt to succeed, of how he had fallen into the habit of letting Chloe dictate his opinions. He apologized, genuinely, for his assumptions of my incompetence, for his dismissive behavior, for trying to push me out of my own home. I got so used to thinking of you as someone who needed taking care of, he confessed, his voice heavy with self-reproach, instead of someone who had always taken care of everyone else, father included. I listened patiently, my heart aching for the lost years, but also swelling with compassion. Arthur saw it, Ethan. I told him gently. He didn't want you to be lost to that. He wanted you to remember who I was and who you were meant to be. That evening, we cooked Arthur's favorite meal together, his famous shepherd's pie. We shared stories of him, crying and laughing in equal measure. The kitchen, once a place of solitary grief, now buzzed with a fragile, renewed connection. As the evening drew to a close, Ethan looked at me, his eyes earnest. Mother, can you ever forgive me? I reached across the table and took his hand. I already have, Ethan, I assured him, my voice soft. Now, you need to forgive yourself. Arthur didn't want to punish you. He wanted to protect me, yes, but he also wanted to help you find your way back, to become the man he always knew you could be. Izaitu. 6 months after Arthur's death, my life felt not just rebuilt, but truly lived. I was thriving, surrounded by new friends, new passions, and the familiar comfort of my home. Ethan visited every Sunday, sometimes bringing his own cooking experiments. Our relationship was slowly, painstakingly, rebuilding. Not on the old foundations of expectation and disappointment, but on a new, fragile, mutual respect. He had even started therapy, he told me, to address some of his own controlling tendencies and understand where he had gone wrong. Sitting in Arthur's garden, surrounded by the roses he had so lovingly tended, I realized the profound depth of his final gift. It wasn't just financial security, it was the chance to reclaim my identity, to redefine my life, and, in a way, to help my son reclaim his own. He had kept his promise, my Arthur. He had taken care of everything, and in doing so, he had given me back my life, and a chance for a true family again.